Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, and others who have been with us through this journey, it's a pleasure to be back with you. My name is Jenetta Barry, and our show today is Talking Heads. And I'm an expert presenter on today's topic, which is about identifying and owning and appreciating all our human traits, negative and positive. So let's begin. You know, for those of you who've been following my other episodes that have led up to this one, you might remember I talked about there being over 4,700 human traits in the dictionary. That's nearly 5,000 human traits. And somewhere along the line, we've been taught that only the positive human traits are the ones worth identifying with and worth pursuing, and that we must eliminate all negative thought, word, and deed in the forms of our traits for us to experience a happy and healthy life, for us to be accepted and acceptable, for us to be loved and lovable. And that's quite a thing to do, because as I've just said just now, they are human traits, whether they're positive or negative. I've also discussed in previous episodes how we understand that our whole life works in cycles, brainwave cycles, emotional cycles, and everything that is brainwaves and emotions are attached to our traits. So we understand when studying a cycle that a cycle requires equal amount of positive and negative charge for it to be empowered. And a very good example, as I've used before, is electricity. Electricity with only positive charge in it is disempowered. So we understand that our brains and our emotions, our thought processes and our emotions require work in cycles. We've got brain waves and we have waves of emotion. So we understand they operate in cycles. Cycles need positive and negative, but we're told we're only allowed to operate in half our brain and half our feelings, and that's only the positive. And it doesn't work because you become disempowered. So today's session is about learning how to identify, own, and appreciate all those traits that are listed in the dictionary, all those human traits, because the more you accept and love those parts of you that you've been judging, the more you come into a spontaneous feeling of acceptance and open-hearted appreciation of yourself. And when that happens, different conversations start coming out of your mouth when you're challenged and even when you're not challenged. And if it's a big charge and you're feeling challenged, even though you know how to do this, you now have the skills and tools. So I'm going to give you an overview of that today. If you'd like to know more about how to really skillfully do this, I would love to share more with you at another time. But today, we're going to get an overview about it. So to give you a quote that's actually anonymous, the happiest people I know are evaluating and improving themselves. The unhappy people are usually evaluating and judging others. And it's very, very true, because what happens is, let's start with the trait of judgment. You know that judgment's been given a bad name. A lot of words have been given a bad name. A lot of traits have been given a bad name. And we all judge We all judge. The way I've put this together required judgment. This whole radio station required judgment. Our judgment in a place of manageability is our discernment, our ability to be discerning, to make those judgment calls. What happens is when we say that judgment is being judgmental is bad, it means that we find it a difficult trait to manage because it becomes extremely charged. And when you're extremely charged about a trait, that trait is inside you, which means if you're not liking a trait, then you're not liking that part of yourself. You're not loving that part of yourself. So secretly, deep down inside of us, we can be deeply judgmental of both ourselves and others and circumstances. So becoming clear as to which part of your life, so that's which part of yourself, which part of other people you interact with or know of, and which part of situations you know about or are dealing with you're most judgmental about. Because that's a really great start, is to see where your judgment is. I call it the dance of life, where we do this little merry dance of going, I'm doing it better than others, or others are doing it better than me. So we put ourselves down or we put ourselves up in that judgment that if we're superior, we're in control. And if we're inferior, we feel lesser than, then we lose control. And it's not like that at all. It's actually quite a different story. You see, anything we judge in ourselves as being inferior or not good enough will leave us seeking and admiring its opposite trait in more, or what we perceive as more superior, loved or lovable people or circumstances or a person. So I might be sounding like I'm talking gobbledygook here. But anything we go, okay, I don't have that trait, but Joe Bloggs does, or that group of people do, and we admire them for what they're doing. What we're not understanding is that we have that trait. It is inherently in us. It's part of our wise wisdom, our innate genius. All that's happened is that we've gone into the perception that we don't have it, and we've marginalized it and gone, it's not good enough, to the point that we don't even recognize its presence in us. And then we look outside of ourselves to see who's got it and admire them and put them on that pedestal. And the other way around, anything we pride ourselves in being, I'm this and I'm that, and it could be kind, loving, whatever it is, I pride myself. That means, again, we're marginalizing the opposite trait, which is present in us, and we have turned the volume down on and hidden. And when we hide that trait and go, I'm never like that, it means we're judging that half of who we are, all those negative traits of who we are unacceptable, unlovable, and must never be a part of who we are. So it means that we're basically going around our day-to-day life judging that half of who we are is not acceptable. And then we wonder why we wake up in the middle of the night going, something's missing in my life. What is it? There seems to be an incompleteness. Well, the incompleteness is the inability to understand the value of your negative traits inside you and how important and valuable they are, as much as they don't serve. So this is not saying they do only serve and we must only say they're fabulous and marvelous. That's not what it's about. It's about being able to say, as much as they don't serve, they have an equal list that's as equally long that does serve. So anything that we judge in ourselves as unacceptable and unlovable, we will reflect out to other people, and actually we attract them into our lives almost like inadvertent teachers. So bet your bottom dollar, anything that you're charged up about and you pride yourself that you aren't that, or you don't do that, or you don't live that, or you don't experience that, or you don't anything that, you are going to have a lot of people, but at least one, but often a lot, who are doing all the things that you judge in yourself as unacceptable and unlovable. So let's look at some traits. I mean, 4,700 will be here till this time next year. But here are some positive traits: accessible, active, adaptable, admirable, adventurous, agreeable, alert, articulate, presentable, amiable, appreciative, articulate, aspiring, athletic. And then the list of traits that often comes through when I'm working with people who are just finding that life is blindsiding them all the time. It might be a boss, it might be a colleague, it might be clients, it might be the job itself, it might be a family member or friends or whatever it might be. Bet your bottom dollar that these 15 traits, one of them comes up when they start trying to define what it is in others that they either dislike or even despise. So judgmental, there it is at the top of the list, although it doesn't necessarily mean it is the top. Unapproachable, unkind, boastful, self-important, self-serving, selfish, cruel, thoughtless, obnoxious, uncaring, careless, lack of cleanliness, had that one not so long ago, superior, and lazy. And that's only a hand or a few handfuls of some of the traits that get thrown out as people sit there going, I am not that. I'm really careful and meticulous in not doing that. So it boils down to perceiving we are better or lesser than other people or our circumstances. And once we own the trait, that we either marginalize or we bring into manageability the trait that we pride ourselves of being absolutely amazing at, then that aha moment, that epiphany moment, in science we call it a photon moment, often happens when you start realizing you're displaying or portraying the trait silently. Now, I'm going to give you an example not so long ago of a couple who were going through a really difficult time. And one of the things with the Epiphany process is that any relationships we work with in the process isn't about getting people to reconcile necessarily, because it might not be appropriate. But it is about getting them to step forward and speak with clarity and certainty and specificity from a place deep within their heart, so that they can speak their truth authentically. A lot of people actually throw that word authenticity around a lot these days. But true authenticity is learning how to love every part of yourself so that you can step forward, not in extreme judgment and not in deep fear, but from a place of the truth and the light and open-hearted love, where you speak your truth, and then the person has a choice. And this is what happens before we go into this example of this couple. The person might not agree with you because they're in deep fear and judgment about this whole scenario. So what often happens is, I always call it, they turn into hissy goblins, and they go, la, 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 and they might even shout or scream or just generally disagree with you. And then they go off. Probably in an absolute sulk or a fit or whatever it is. And you're sitting there in your light and your truth, knowing before would have possibly been that you felt guilty or you felt justified, I'm justified in saying that. I feel they had no right. When we've got a charge like that, we're in fear and judgment. Or if we're in guilt, we're in fear and judgment. So when you're in that place of being in the light and owning the trait that you've been able to step forward and clearly and very specifically express, you're able to more easily, I don't say it's easy, but you're able to more easily sit in that place of knowing that you did it from a place of love. And one of two things will happen with that person. They'll either leave and have nothing to do with you for a long time, or leave completely, or because they're more tuned in and they're dealing with their issues, will suddenly realize on an unconscious level that that was said by you from your heart, and it wasn't said with malice or destruction or judgment or fear or any of those things. And they'll come back with incredible conversation where they've matched your energy and matched what you're doing, and suddenly they're speaking wisely. I often have clients phone me and say, you know, I've just had a conversation with great Uncle Johnny, who I hate. If I've said 2 words to him in my whole life, it's a lot. And here I had this 10-minute conversation, speaking my truth, expressing how I felt. And he went away, not a happy camper, and he came back and he had a reasonable conversation with me. And that's another word that has a charge, being given a bad name, being reasonable. In its pure essence, it's the ability to reason, able to reason. So by stepping into your truth and light, it gives the opportunity for those who are ready to step into theirs and become reasonable. So to help you with this couple, it was the wife who came to me. And you know, it's so lovely when I have both husband, wife, or partners who they may not be married, come to me together, because then we're having a cross-pollination of conversations. But it still works when only one partner comes through. It just takes a little bit more trickiness to get it into balance, and perhaps a little longer. So she came to me and said, I cannot live another minute with my husband. It's just become too much. Now, the very first thing that I got her to do was to identify the key traits that he was portraying, that she either disliked or even really it was like disgusting to her. It was just not acceptable. And she started making that list of, some of them were there, but the one that was really top of her list was rude. He's really rude. He's rude to me, and he's rude to other people, and so on. And we got to that trait because she was just saying he's unkind. So the other thing is that we get very, very specific as to whether that trait needs fine-tuning. So what specifically about being unkind do you not like? Well, he doesn't talk very nicely. So what trait is that? And eventually, if we'd stayed at unkind, we wouldn't have had a breakthrough to the extent that she had. So she was able to get to rude and say, that's the key one that she really, really despises. Despise, that was the word I was trying to think of just now. She really, really despises. And she says, you know, I'm the sort of person that makes it a point to be courteous and kind and polite, because people deserve that. Nobody deserves rudeness. So when you're in that place where you believe that only being polite and kind and not rude, no rudeness, it means that you're judging that its opposite must never be portrayed by you. So there's the yin and yang in a relationship. So you can see it. We attract in a romantic relationship, especially because, and we were talking about this earlier in another show, where in a romantic relationship, we tend to go into fantasy and maximize all the things we love about that person and marginalize the things that bother us, because that's where all the fluffiness and the romance is and so on. And of course, because it's out of balance with time, its contra comes in, and we start marginalizing what we admire in them, and what we dislike or even despise, suddenly the volume comes up. And suddenly we're dealing with, I don't like this person very much, because we're doing a roller coaster of balancing out our relationship with them. And this is what she started doing. And she was able to get down to rude. And then I was able to get her to start identifying where she had been rude to the same degree, in the same form, in the same way he's been rude, and to the same degree, or in different ways to the same degree, right through to her earliest memory of doing it. And of course, the first thing we do, I certainly, when I started studying this, and putting this together, I was doing my daughter Jenny and the argument she and I had the day she died. And of course, the natural thing is, I'm never rude. I pride myself that I do not do rudeness. It is one of the key things I never, 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 ever do. Okay, so when you were in the playground at 7, you weren't rude to any little boy or any little girl about their hair or the way they played or the way they ran. No, no, no. And then suddenly, well, actually, yeah, there was this boy I once said it to. And we carry on going, where were you rude to your mother, to your father as a teenager? Did you do it once? Did you do it many times? Where have you been rude to a group of people? And suddenly they start listing where they've been equally rude. And the one, often the aha that makes them really realize that rudeness is something they do all the time, but either in the same way as the person they're judging or in different ways, is when I say, where have you been silently rude? Because rude is rude. Whether you express it or whether you keep it internally inside yourself, it's still the trait and you're still running it inside you silently. So, well, yeah, actually, I thought that woman was really brash, and I just thought, shut up, lady, you're just commanding the space in this shop. And that's actually quite, if I said that out loud, it would be quite rude. And so she started doing that as well. And then suddenly she realized that rudeness was a part of her life. And then we went in to where, in his being rude, now this is not saying that his rudeness does not need calling out or addressing, because it's more than likely in an extreme place. So this is not saying, oh no, that's all right, and doing a Pollyanna, like the movie Pollyanna, where everything's okay and nothing's wrong. It's not saying that. This is not saying it's okay that he's rude. But what it is saying is, in his being rude, what skills, techniques, experience, and exposure has it pushed you into experiencing and given you that would be missing in your life if he was always polite? And then the other question you bring in is, if he was always polite around you and others, what would be missing in your life? And of course, that's quite a difficult thing to do too. And that's why it helps, because I'm like that coach at gym that goes, you've got to do this circuit one more time. We say 5 emotional push-ups now, and 10 press-ups as you go through your thought processes, because that's where this pushes you to go. And she started saying to me, when he's rude like that, it pushes me to turn to my mother and spend more time with her. If he had always been polite, I'd have spent less time with her. So there would be an advantage of spending more time with him because he's polite. So we're not marginalizing that, but because he's not, it allowed me to share moments with my mother and gain memories. And we had conversations, and her level of advice was different from ever before. And her compassion, and I'd have never experienced that. And then she went on to talk about how it actually pushed her into painting. Whenever he was in this rude place and mode, she would go off and paint. And she created these most amazing paintings through his rudeness. And at that point, she was able to say, I can actually thank him for being rude, even though he does need calling out. So that he can go from being rude to being open and honest from an open heart rather than from a place of destruction. So, and if he's not prepared to do that, that's also his prerogative. But when she started seeing how his rudeness had equally served, and she did it in all areas of her life, from financially, what it pushed her to do with her finances and gave her skills financially, what it pushed her to do in her work, how it helped her to deal with rude customers, because he had given her a lot of ways to work through it, and it helped her to do the same with customers and family and friends, and what it pushed her to do spiritually and gain more faith and trust in either herself or others or the universe at large. And she had this equally long list, and suddenly I saw her starting to open, going, oh my word. And then she was able to start listing where in her being rude it had served, and by always thinking she was always being polite, what it took away from her. And by the end of that first session, she had softened. And then I got that phone call to say, I've just had a conversation with my husband where when I spoke my truth, he wasn't rude to me. He actually listened and he was considerate and he changed. And that's what happens is when we shift our charge internally, it has an effect on those around us. So when we're about going, it's their fault, it's their trait, it's their issue, and I'm incensed, or I'm much more superior than that, all it does is create more of that. When you're able to start asking yourself, this is obviously a little bit more intricate. I'm giving you the basics tonight. But when you start asking yourself, where there is equal service to disservice, in all ways that you look at it, then hearts start opening. And then you start attracting people into your life who identify with what you are. And those who don't identify, they peel away. And you start finding more and more of your tribe that identifies with who you are, with that open heart. And you find yourself being able to talk more and more authentically. And when I'm in a tricky situation, I have a very tricky life with what I do, in that I'm changing conversations about suicide and depression to a point where when I'm supposedly talking something that will create a trigger point, I sit there and go, if we stand on eggshells talking about this, more and more people will shut down. When we talk open-heartedly from a place of truth and the light, then more and more people will balance their conversations about feeling depressed, will balance their conversations about feeling suicide or their opinions about suicide. But it's been tricky because I've had to step forward and often go where many men and women will not go. But it's because it comes from an open-hearted place and space. And I've owned the traits that were judgmental before about those issues. So if you'd like to know more about how to get into this so that your traits can be equally owned and loved and accepted by you and those around you, please do feel free to reach out to me. And I want to thank you for your attention and interest tonight, because for me, this was my life savior. I nearly ended my life 3 times, and this changed my life. And I want to also say, as we end off, this is one amazing channel. USA Global TV, in my opinion, is doing it in ways, as I'm talking, from a place of open-hearted appreciation. If you'd like to know more of all the different programs that we run, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is USA Global TV. And you can find all our other Talking Heads episodes under the playlist Talking Heads 2022. And they are vastly interesting, informative, and educative subjects that you will find that you'll be very sad to miss. And again, please do reach out to me if I may be of service. You can contact me on theepiphanyprocess.com or Jenetta, JENETTA, at theepiphanyprocess.com. I'm also on Facebook and as Jenetta Barry and the Epiphany Process. And I look forward to spending some more time with you again next week. And as I end off, lots of love.